Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qi. Coming up in this edition, Jae-myung has resigned as the leader of South Korea's main opposition Democratic Party amid wide expectations for his presidential run. China has released a white paper outlining its stance on economic and trade issues with the United States as trade tensions escalate due to Washington's new tariffs. And residents in Khartoum are gradually returning home after the Sudanese armed forces retook the country's capital. We begin in Asia. Jae-myung has resigned as the leader of South Korea's main opposition Democratic Party amid wide expectations for his presidential run. The country has set a snap presidential election for June 3rd following the removal of impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol from office. But polls show the ruling party could still win. Jack Barton reports.
Well, up until a few weeks ago, everyone, of course, would have assumed that moving on from martial law would have been the main motivator and that, of course, the opposition would win a resounding victory. And like after the impeachment of former President Park Geun-hye, the ruling party's popularity would remain in single digits. But it seems US President Donald Trump and his tariffs have overshadowed all of that. The US, of course, being South Korea's second biggest trade partner, but also South Korea knows that the impact on other countries will also be felt on South Korea, including the impact on China. So this is likely to dominate the elections here. This is likely to be the big topic. There is a sense everyone has moved on from martial law, and there is no guarantee that the opposition is going to win because of the martial law. What we see in the polls is the parties often neck and neck. Sometimes the ruling party is a little ahead. Sometimes the Democratic Party is a little ahead. One of the reasons for that is because the ruling party has shown economic competency through this period, but also there's a lot of outstanding corruption cases against Jae-myung. If he can push them through appeal and become president, he'll have presidential immunity, but even many in his own party are not too happy about this fact. So at the moment, you'd think it would be the opposition party guaranteed to win, but it's really up in the air.
That was Jack Barton in South Korea. In China, Beijing says unilateralism and protectionism will undermine the development of economic ties with its major trade partner, the United States. The government has released a white paper outlining the country's stance on economic and trade issues with the U.S., stressing the importance of talks between the two sides based on mutual respect and win-win cooperation. The document says China has fulfilled the terms of a Phase 1 trade agreement it signed in January 2020 with the U.S., but Washington has violated its obligations under the deal. It stresses that China will continue to uphold free trade and abide by the rules of the World Trade Organization. It also notes that Beijing and Washington can resolve differences through dialogue, underscoring mutual benefit and win-win cooperation as the essential nature of bilateral trade. Feng Yilei has more on the message China tries to convey through the white paper.
Let's break down the key points. First, the document outlines 6 core arguments. Mutual benefit as the foundation of bilateral trade, China's compliance with the China-US Phase 1 trade deal and the U.S. violations of that agreement, and China's adherence to the WTO rules, as well as the dangers of U.S. protectionism and the urgent need for equal dialogue. It highlights staggering bilateral trade growth from $2.5 billion in 1979 to nearly $688 billion last year, but warns that recent U.S. actions now threaten this progress. And the white paper also condemns Washington's sweeping tariffs, including new levies targeting Chinese goods like fentanyl-related products and the proposed 50% reciprocal tariffs, as well as the Section 301 investigations against China's maritime industries. Beijing calls these measures dangerously unilateral and a violation of market principles, stressing they have already forced China to take countermeasures under international law. And the document also emphasizes that while friction is inevitable between the two economic giants, the solution lies in mutual respect, not trade wars. Quoting the document, history has shown cooperation benefits both sides, while confrontation results in mutual loss, and protectionism has no future, and there are no winners in a tariff battle.
That was Feng Yilei reporting. In North America, Consumers in the United States are bracing for price hikes amid the tariff volatility. They've already paid a record high price for eggs in January, when the average for a dozen grade A eggs hit $4.95. The US government has been seeking imports from Europe as it grapples with a bird flu outbreak. Its tariffs will affect all other imported goods. Nitsa Soledad Perez spoke with some shoppers at a store in Miami.
Some U.S. consumers are rushing to buy foreign-made goods before tariffs kick in. Economists are warning that this recent tariffs announced by President Trump would likely increase prices on everyday items. At this grocery store in downtown Miami, local sentiment is mixed.
Well, I've been preparing very well because I come here every day to pick up everything I can before these prices go up. It's going to be terrible. I believe in my heart, I grew up in New York. In 1960 to the 70s, the recession happened when people went out in the streets, started burning places, and I couldn't even come out. My mother wouldn't even let me come out. It's going to be worse.
It's awful. It's calling survival. Well, I'm going to survive, I don't know. It's already expensive.
What are you going to do?
Keep on pinching pennies. What else can I do? Can't do anything.
Some view these tariffs as part of President Trump's negotiation strategy, aimed at encouraging other countries to open their economies further to American exports. Now, other shoppers also believe these measures will ultimately benefit their wallets.
It's very complicated. Let's see the results, because he says it's going to work out at the end.
I know he's raising the tariffs so he can lower taxes, right? Something like that. That's the goal. I just have to see how that works out. I would like to have all my taxes given to me at the end of the year.
But regardless of strategy, what many fear the most is the economic uncertainty spreading through global markets will likely increase the prices, even if it's only in the short term.
That was Nitsa Soledad Perez reporting from Miami. Turning to Europe, Greece is concerned about not just the tariffs on its exports, but also the fees on Chinese ships that anchor at US ports. The move has raised red flags because many Greek ship owners rely heavily on Chinese shipyards. Evangelos Sipsis spoke to industry insiders about their dilemma.
A new Trump-backed plan could slap massive fees on ships linked to China, and Greek ship owners could feel the hit hard. Many of their vessels are built or currently under construction in Chinese shipyards, putting them squarely in the line of fire if the plan is a go-ahead.
At the moment, 33% of the fleet, that is of the ships currently at sea, have been repaired in China. And about 67% of the ships that Greek ship owners are building are in China. So a large number of businesses are tied to the Chinese shipbuilding industry. This means that these companies will be directly affected by the decision of the President of the United States.
And that's a problem for Greece, whose shipping giants run the world's largest merchant fleet. For years, they've been turned to Chinese yards for cost-effective shipbuilding. But this new U.S. plan could make that relationship a little more expensive.
You start to worry when you see one of the planet's major powers, a key player in global trade, introducing regulations that would have been unthinkable in the past. Naturally, someone might start thinking that an alternative must be created soon, an alternative space for shipbuilding, because of this trade war with China. But it's not the case. There's no alternative at the moment.
The Trump administration argues that it's all about national security and that China's lead in shipbuilding is putting the United States at risk. However, critics say that it could backfire, dragging countries like Greece into the crossfire.
What's important now is clarity. If these fees come into force, ship owners might avoid US ports entirely or move towards Japanese or Korean-built ships. This won't be a quick shift.
And while shifting away from Chinese-built ships won't happen overnight, the added cost will almost certainly trickle down to consumers on both sides of the Atlantic.
At the end of the day, it's the consumer who will pay. The American consumer will have more expensive products, guaranteed. Same goes for the European consumer.
What started as a plan to boost American shipyards could end up rocking global shipping. And for Greek ship owners, the message is clear. Choppy waters may be ahead, and everyone's waiting to see just how big the waves could become.
That was Evangelos Sipsis on the potential impact on the shipbuilding industry under U.S. tariffs. To the Middle East, US President Donald Trump says his country will hold direct talks with Iran of its nuclear program. The State Department says envoy Steve Witkoff will speak with Iranian officials on the weekend. But Iran says the two countries will hold indirect discussions and they will be mediated by Oman. Ehsan Kevani has this report.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says representatives from Iran and the U.S. will participate in mediated discussions in Oman on April 12th. This would be the first diplomatic contact between Tehran and Washington since the recent American administration change. While official statements describe the format as a facilitated dialogue rather than direct negotiations, observers in Iran have confirmed that both governments are sending senior officials to the talks. The Iranian delegation will be headed by the foreign minister, while the American team will be led by the presidential representative for regional affairs. And neither side has disclosed the expected duration of these consultations. Although Tehran's public position maintains these are strictly proximity talks. Some analysts suggest that the format could evolve if initial exchanges prove productive. Iran's primary focus in these initial discussions will be assessing Washington's commitment to meaningful engagement. Having faced the Trump administration's abrupt withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear accord, Tehran remains deeply skeptical of U.S. intentions.
That was Ehsan Kevani reporting. Finally, in Africa, residents in Khartoum are gradually returning home after the Sudanese armed forces retook the capital last month. Sudan has been embroiled in the civil war for nearly 2 years. The conflict has devastated many areas in the capital, destroying iconic buildings. Residents hope that the change is a sign of better times ahead after months of fear and hardships. Sophia Shimachiro has more.
Debris and a structure barely standing is all that remains of Abdulillah Mohammed's home in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum. Returning to his home after nearly 2 years of displacement, he stands among the wreckage in total shock, but also with a steely defiance to carry on.
They left nothing behind. They took everything and they destroyed everything. But we say, thank God. I came here specifically to assess the situation and see the life, so that my family doesn't come and get confused about what to do. I came first, and then I can evaluate the situation for them here.
Like Muhammad, many others who fled the greater capital areas, which include the cities of Khartoum, Omdurman and Bahri, are now trickling back. This is after the Sudanese army declared victory in the area, after months of intense battles against the rapid support forces. They first retook control of the presidential palace, followed by the conflict-damaged airport and other key sites in the city center. For many, even though the conflict has devastated the nation, their motivation is to rebuild their lives in their hometowns.
Despite leaving, there is no place like our country, no place like where we grew up. But due to the circumstances and many reasons, we were forced to stay away. Now the situation is good, thank God. We see electricity in the streets, shops are open, and there are no problems, God willing. Hopefully everyone will return. This war made people realize what their country is.
But it's a country still in the midst of a brutal war. And this means that many of the services they once took for granted in the capital before the conflict are no longer readily available, nor will they be for the foreseeable future.
Life started to gradually return to this area, and citizens have started returning to their homes. But they are suffering severely from power outages due to the destruction of transformers by rebel militias, who destroyed most of the electricity transformers and even took the cables and copper inside these generators.
The Sudan army has been making gains in recent months, but not enough to force the RSF to concede, much less to agree to the army's demands for a precious ceasefire and potential peace talks. The large militia still holds large swaths of territory in the west and south. It is the residents' hope, however, that a day will come when peace and security will be the norm once again.
That was Sophia Shimachiro reporting. Now, recapping the headlines before we go, Jae-myung has resigned as the leader of South Korea's main opposition Democratic Party amid wide expectations for his presidential run. China has released a white paper outlining its stance on economic and trade issues with the United States as trade tensions escalate due to Washington's new tariffs. And residents in Khartoum are gradually returning home after the Sudanese army retook the country's capital. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qizhi. Thanks for joining us.